On January 9th, the U.S. Department of Justice did something that would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. They served Jerome Powell, the Fed Reserve Chair, with grand jury subpoenas for a criminal investigation into an office renovation at the Fed's Eccles building that burned through $2.5 billion. Well, Powell didn't stay quiet. Just a few days after, he released a video statement that felt like a declaration of war. He called the investigation a pretext, a smokescreen designed to intimidate the central bank into lowering interest rates. Naturally, the media is in total panic. They're saying the Fed has fallen, this is the end of American credibility, and the Banana Republic era has begun. But wait a minute, if you look at the markets the following day, something strange happened. The S&P 500 didn't crash. They started weak, but ultimately finished on green. Today, we're moving beyond the headlines to the math that the media is too afraid to touch. Why is everyone so bearish? Make sure to stick with me till the end to find out why. You might have heard one name over and over again, Arthur Burns. He was the Fed chair in 1972, and he is the reason every independent central banker has nightmares. Back then, President Richard Nixon was facing a re-election campaign. He didn't care about the long-term health of the dollar. All he wanted was a landslide election victory. He famously pressured Arthur Burns, telling him to keep the interest rates low so the economy would feel upbeat and keep the voters satisfied. Despite his resistance at first, Burns folded and Nixon got his win. But the cost was a decade of elevated inflation that almost destroyed the American middle class. And look, if you only read the headlines, that's exactly what it looks like. We have subpoenas, DOJ pressure, and a Fed chair trying to stay independent. But here's the contrarian truth. The market isn't closing in the green because it's ignoring the drama. It's closing in the green because it wants the Fed to lose. We are witnessing a fundamental shift in the American financial architecture. The administration has made a calculated choice. They are choosing the known evil by forcing the Fed to be more dovish, leading to a higher inflation, over the unknown evil, which is higher interest rates leading to higher interest payments. Let's think about it. If the Fed is captured and forced to lower rates, then yes, we get inflation. Your groceries get more expensive, the market may get corrected, and your dollar loses value. It sounds bad, but we know how to handle that. We've done this before. We saw this in the 1970s, and we also saw it in 2022. Did we survive? Obviously, and that's why this is the known evil. But the unknown evil? That would be a world where the US government can't pay its interest. That might be a Pandora's box that can trigger the collapse of the entire global financial system. And in terms of debt, the situation in 1972 has quite a stark difference from what we are seeing now. Less than $500 billion of national debt in 1972 versus $38 trillion now. Also, back then, the debt to GDP ratio was just 34% compared to 124% now. This gigantic debt obligates the government to pay high interest payments, and as we see the November data from the Peterson Foundation, this is already the second largest source of spending of the government, just behind Social Security, but larger than higher than healthcare and defense. Currently, interest payments represent around 20% of the U.S. fiscal revenue. To put it simply, for every $5 the government collects from taxes, $1 will go for repayment of debt. And according to the World Bank in 2022, the average ratio globally was 5% or 4 times smaller than in the US. So, what does a debt-strained US actually look like? Well, we don't know. Because we've never reached a point where the Treasury cannot cover its interest payments, this is the true unknown evil. What we do know is that a debt crunch triggers a total collapse of confidence when 20% of every tax dollar goes to servicing past debt rather than serving the citizens and the economy. For investors, this shift from risk-free to solvency risk would trigger a mass abandonment of U.S. assets as they flee a system that can no longer afford its own future. This is way worse than inflation. When you see the DOJ going after Powell over renovations, don't get distracted by the marble floors. They are removing the man who represents higher for longer, because higher for longer will break the United States. By forcing the Fed under the dominance of the White House and keeping rates low, the government can melt the real value of that $38 trillion debt by replacing previously high-interest debt with a newer low-interest debt, and that also means suppressing the soaring interest payments. Now, here is the most contrarian part. Why would the U.S. stocks benefit from this? Because the alternative is worse. In a world of global chaos, investors don't look for perfect. They look for liquid and solvent. If the U.S. government guarantees its own solvency by capturing the Fed, it becomes a safe port in the storm. The green closing of S&P 500 at the start of the video proves this. The green closing proves it. While the mainstream was crying about lost independence, the big money was realizing that a Fed that folds is a Fed that provides a permanent floor for asset prices. For the tech-heavy S&P 500 and NASDAQ, this is a massive win. Lower rates don't just protect valuations, they allow the government to stop wasting tax dollars on dead interest payments and start pouring that capital into the CHIPS Act, AI initiatives, and national infrastructure. We are moving from a regime of paying for the past to investing in the future. Let's be honest, the battle for the Fed isn't over. Between now and May of 2026, the DOJ pressure will ramp up. You'll definitely see more headlines about building renovations, lost emails, and ethics violations. Make sure you don't fall for the noise. The independence of the central bank was a luxury of the 20th century, when debt was low and the world was stable. With $38 trillion on the line, that luxury is gone, and interest payments eating out 20% of the fiscal revenue. Trump cannot afford such luxury. The market has already made its choice, and it seems like it chose the known evil. How do you feel about the Trump-dominated Fed? Let me know in the comments below. Please, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. I'll see you in the next one.